Hello, welcome to Fast Books. In this video, we are going to continue reading the first book of the Wheel of Time series. Let's get started with part 2. Chapter 10, Leavetaking. Rand and Matt enter the stables with Lan to find Perrin already there. Lan asks Perrin if he's searched the stables, and Perrin says he has. 5 horses are ready and waiting for them. Matt makes a comment about Rand's sword, and then they notice Perrin has an axe strapped to his belt. Lan says that Matt's bow is just as good a weapon, though, or the slings they use to bring down rabbits. Matt and Perrin say that they left notes for their families, since Moiraine asked them not to tell anyone they were leaving. Rand says that he talked to his father, which Moiraine hears as she enters the stable. She dismisses it as part of the pattern. Lan says they are ready to leave, but Egwene slips into the stables and insists that she be allowed to come, too. She had noticed Matt and Perrin creeping about, and the extra horses Lan was buying, and deduced that they were leaving. She says this may be the only chance she gets to leave the Two Rivers and see the outside world. She also dismisses the boy's story about being chased by Trollocs. Moiraine agrees to let her come, once again invoking the pattern, overriding Lan's incredulous objections. They decide that she can ride the Gleeman's horse, but then Tom speaks from up in the hayloft, saying that will not be possible since he is going with them, too. He claims that he wants to play in Tar Valon. Lan watches him warily, bare sword in hand, until Moiraine agrees to let him come. They end up saddling Bela for Egwene to ride. They leave the stable and head off into the night. Lan brings them to a halt just before leaving the stable yard, and they hear the rattle of boots on the wagon bridge. Watching quietly, they see a group of men wearing old weapons and armor obviously scrounged from forgotten storage places, patrolling the village. Clearly this must be the new village watch. After the watch has gone, Lan leads them north through the village and out into the countryside, paralleling the north road. Rand looks up at the sky and sees a dark, bat-like shadow crossing the moon. When he tells the others about it, Lan identifies it as a Drakkar, which Tom says is another kind of shadow spawn created after the Age of Legends. They continue north towards Taren Ferry. Chapter 11, The Road to Taren Ferry. The horses gallop along the north road, Lan and Moiraine in front and Rand in the rear, just behind Tom. Cloud keeps wanting to race with Lan's horse, but Rand holds him back. Worried about Bela's ability to keep up, and whether Lan would consider Egwene worth going back for, Rand exhorts her with all his heart to run, and she does. They reach Watch Hill in record time and pause outside while the town's Beltane celebration is still going on. Tom, Matt and Perrin urge a rest stop. Lan says that they cannot stop, and Moiraine is moving among the horses, restoring their fatigue. She notes that Bela is perhaps the least tired of all the horses. The Drakkar swoops low over them with a fearsome scream, panicking Cloud, who runs off with Rand still holding his reins. Rand manages to keep his hold until the horse halts his headlong rush, and looks back to see that the rest of the horses had also panicked, except for Lan's and Moiraine's. Watch Hill's celebrations stop for a moment, as they too have heard the scream. Lan says the Drakkar must have already told its master about them, so they could spare no more time to rest. Everyone promptly mounts except Rand, who is standing with his sword out, searching the sky for the Drakkar. He is embarrassed when they call to him, and leaps onto Cloud. They ride closer together this time, the Drakkar's cries following them, and Rand is surprised to see Egwene exulting in Bela's uncanny speed. Moiraine responds to a question from Lan that she cannot attack the thing from horseback in the dark. Drakkar are hard enough to kill when they can be seen. Instead, she summons a fog to cover their path. Lan says there is still only one possible destination, and Moiraine says she intends to use the Halfman's own cleverness against him. They race on and on through the fog, the Drakkar's cries falling behind, for what seems like hours. Lan suddenly calls them to a halt, and Rand races past the group before he can rein in his horse. They have reached Taren Ferry. Lan and Moiraine lead them to the house of Master Hightower, the ferryman. Lan pounds loudly on the door to wake him. The ferryman says the ferry never crosses at night, but Lan gives him enough gold to change his mind, and he goes to rouse his haulers. Chapter 12. Across the Taren, Rand and the others follow Lan and Moiraine through the fog-covered town of Taren Ferry. Rand takes a few steps forward onto wood planking before he realizes that they have reached the ferry landing. Lan lifts Perrin's cloak to make his axe visible and motions for others to show their weapons also, just before the ferryman approaches with 6 sturdy helpers. Rand grasps the hilt of his sword, Matt puts a hand on his quiver, and Tom seems to conjure knives out of nowhere. Lan tells the ferryman that they will get the rest of their gold on the far side of the river. They bring their horses onto the ferry, which is attached to ropes on either side that stretched across the river. The ferrymen cast loose and begin hauling the ferry across. Rand asks Lan if they were really in danger of being robbed, and Lan says that men will do many things when they think they are unseen. He assures Rand that however corrupt Master Hightower is, he is unlikely to ferry a Myrddrail and his Trollocs over after them. The man overhears a little bit of their talk and looks at them suspiciously. They reach the other side of the river and disembark. Master Hightower demands the rest of his gold, and Moiraine says they shall get what was promised and extra silver for the haulers' quick crossing. Everyone leaves the ferry and coins are being distributed when the ferry breaks loose and begins to spin in a whirlpool that breaks up as they watch. Lan apologizes for the ill luck, and pays the ferryman more gold for the loss of his ferry. The ferryman takes the gold and runs upriver followed by his men. As they leave the riverbank, Rand notices that the fog disappears suddenly a few paces further from the river. Moiraine says that the fog follows the river downstream. She is trying to mislead their pursuers into thinking they might have gone downstream part of the way, rather than continuing straight on to Baerlon. Land leads them further from the riverbank and into the woods a little way. They come to a toppled stand of trees, which Lan has made a shelter beneath, and he starts a small fire. They leave their horses outside. Lan says to leave them saddled but hobbled. Perrin says that they hardly seem tired, but Lan explains that they would gladly run until they died of the exhaustion they didn't even feel. They hear a Drachar's screams from nearby, but Lan listens and says that it is searching the river. Inside the shelter, Moiraine and Egwene sit on the ground facing each other. The villagers and Tom listen as Moiraine tells Egwene about the true source and the One Power. She informs Egwene that she has the inborn ability to channel, and would do it inevitably even if not taught how. She explains further that a girl's chances of survival are better if she is taught. Trying hard, Egwene manages to produce a feeble light inside of Moiraine's blue gem. She proudly announces that she is going to be an Aes Sedai. Chapter 13, Choices. Before anyone sleeps, Moiraine once again heals each person of their fatigue. Lan gets everyone moving early the next day. Lan, scouting ahead and behind the party, finds no evidence of pursuit, but Rand, Matt and Perrin continue to keep their weapons at the ready for some time anyway. The group always stops for the night while there is still a little daylight left, and Lan begins giving the boys lessons on how to better use the weapons they are carrying. One morning, Egwene begins unbraiding her hair. Rand questions why she would do that after waiting all her life for the chance to braid it. She says that Aes Sedai don't braid their hair unless they want to. When Rand points out that she is not an Aes Sedai and the Emonsfield Women's Circle would disapprove, the conversation quickly descends into a shouting match. Eventually, Lan interrupts to ask if they are trying to wake everyone for miles around. A couple of nights later, Matt says he's of the opinion that their pursuers have been lost for good. He thinks they should start thinking of seeing some of the places from Master Alvir's map, such as Kimlin and Ilion. When Perrin wants to know why he'd want to see Ilion, Matt starts to say that one good reason is because the city isn't full of Aes Sedai, but is interrupted by Moiraine's appearance. Moiraine berates them for forgetting the events of Winternight so quickly. She goes on to remind them that the Dark One is after one of them if not all three, and that she intends to stop that from happening, even if that means destroying the trio herself. Egwene continues to have nightly sessions with Moiraine, learning about the One Power and channeling. One evening, Rand surreptitiously follows the pair and listens in on their conversation. Egwene is seeking reassurance that it was evil men who caused the breaking of the world. The Aes Sedai confirms that it was men who caused it, but that they were not evil, just insane. She goes on to point out that Aes Sedai have flaws just like everyone else. When Egwene asks why the Trollocs came to Emond's Field, Moiraine turns her head to look directly at Rand's hiding place in the darkness, and he beats a hasty retreat to the rest of the group, hoping he wasn't seen. Late on the 6th day of their journey, the group finally reaches the town of Baerlon. Moiraine instructs everyone that they are trying to attract as little attention as possible. Here, Moiraine and Lan are known by the aliases of Alice and Andra. When the party requests entrance at one of the closed gates in the town wall, the gatekeeper begins to turn them away to another gate until he sees and recognizes Mistress Alice. Once the party has passed through the gate, Avin the gatekeeper fills them in on recent happenings in Baerlon and beyond. The Children of the Light have come to Baerlon, and finding the governor will not allow more than 10 or so of them in the town at once, have made camp to the north. There are rumors of trouble in Saldia and a big battle in Gildan. In Gildan, the self-proclaimed Dragon Reborn has apparently gathered an army of thousands and has named them the People of the Dragon. When the gatekeeper has exhausted his store of news, the party moves on, eventually entering the stable yard of the Stag and Lion Inn through a rear entrance. They are greeted warmly by Master Fitch, who takes them inside with the promise of hot baths. Chapter 14, The Stag and Lion. The innkeeper leads the group through the kitchen, telling them that the inn is full to bursting due to large numbers of people come down from the mines, telling stories of wolves and worse. Lan vanishes into the common room looking for news, and Moiraine questions the innkeeper about the presence of the Children of the Light in the town. He assures her they are nothing to worry about, and she asks if Min is still there. The Aes Sedai wants to talk to her for some reason. But the group splits up to go to their promised hot baths, and Rand hears nothing more of the conversation. Once settled in for a good soak, Rand asks the attendant if there is any kind of trouble in Baerlon. He answers that there's nothing more than miners fighting, but appears to be hiding something. When he mentions hearing about Trollocs in the borderlands, Matt begins to tell him about their recent battles in the Two Rivers, but is drowned out briefly by Rand, Taren and Tom. Lan arrives then, saying he's been waiting for a good bath, and firmly puts the attendant out of the room. He then gives Matt a sound tongue lashing for telling stories he ought not to be telling, pointing out that the Dark One has spies in many unexpected places. When the men finally leave the bath chamber, Rand sees Moiraine talking with a slender girl at the end of the hallway. He thinks she's a girl anyway, even though she's wearing a man's shirt and pants. The group then assembles in a private dining room to eat. When Rand sees Egwene, he goes over to apologize for their earlier argument, but she turns her back on him. At the table, Moiraine cautions everyone that maids listen at doors and innkeepers like to talk. Talk quickly turns to discussion of news. Lan tells that there apparently was a battle in Gildan and Logan's army won. It is not known with any certainty what happened to the Aes Sedai who were involved in the fight. Moiraine tells the group that she intends for them all to stay in Baerlon for 2 nights, and then leave early in the morning of the second day. After dinner, everyone adjourns to their rooms. The innkeeper was only able to spare 3, 1 for the women and 2 split among the men. Rand drops off to sleep as the Gleeman leaves for the common room to perform. Rand finds himself in a dim stone hallway, with no recollection of how he came to be there. There appears to be nothing there except pairs of doors set opposite each other at intervals, so there is nothing to help in choosing which direction to go. Finding himself thirsty, he follows a steady dripping sound until he finds it is growing no closer, at which point he opens a door and walks through. The room looks out over a balcony onto an impossible sunset, and there is a roaring blaze in the hearth. Suddenly Rand notices a man in front of the fireplace that he had not seen before. When the man speaks to Rand, His mouth and eyes appears as empty sockets full of flame, and Rand tries to flee. But when he crashes through the door on the opposite side of the hallway, he finds himself back in the same room. He tries again to flee, only to find that this time, the door no longer leads into the hallway, but directly back into the same room, and now the door is closed and locked. By now, Rand has concluded that this is a nightmare. The man offers Rand a drink from a jeweled cup, and Rand is very thirsty. But just before he takes a sip, he reconsiders and refuses the beverage. The man is obviously disappointed at this, though Rand cannot discern why. When Rand asks the man to identify himself, he says that some call him Balzaman. Rand flees in terror from the man who has just named himself the Dark One, but is still unable to open the door. Balzaman taunts Rand, asking if he is seeking power and glory, telling him he will be used by the White Tower like every other false dragon. Rand awakens suddenly, gripping the blanket on his bed in the inn. He wonders if he should tell Moiraine about his dream, and it takes a long time for him to fall back to sleep. Chapter 15, Strangers and Friends. After more unpleasant dreams, Rand finally awakens long after sunrise. Before leaving his room, Rand debates whether to take Tam's hair and Mark's sword with him, but eventually decides to. He hurries downstairs, not wanting to waste any more time on his only day in the city. Looking for something to eat, Rand heads for the kitchen, where he finds Master Fitch having an argument with Sara the inn's cook over her cat. When the cook threatens to quit, the innkeeper quickly assures her that he will ignore further complaints from customers about her cat, and she agrees to stay. After throwing Fitch out of the kitchen, she tells Rand that all but one of his friends have already gone out, as she orders a maid to get him some bread and cheese. Rand begins to eat while Sara continues to talk, but becomes agitated when the cook tells him that the innkeeper was complaining about over a dozen dead rats found in the inn, all with their backs broken. Rand begins trying to find someone to talk to about his dream. He finds Tom in the common room, busy telling stories. Next he goes to find which of his friends is still in the building. Taren is still in bed, and he says he may never sleep again because of a nightmare he had, adding that Matt also tossed and turned all night. When the two find that they have had the same dream, they debate telling Moiraine about it, but don't reach a conclusion. Rand decides to go out to see the city, but Taren says he intends to stay in bed a while longer. When Rand gets to the stableyard gate, however, he is overwhelmed by the crowds, the sights and smells, so he turns back and just sits on a barrel outside the back of the inn. There, he once again encounters the slender woman from the previous day, who remarks on his sword and asks him what kind of trouble he's involved in before introducing herself as Min. Rand tries to answer that he's not in any trouble being from the Two Rivers, which is a quiet place of quiet people, but the girl seems to be not listening. She says she has heard the jokes about shepherders from the Two Rivers, but that she's also spoken with those who know better, and they say that Two Rivers folk may appear meek and soft on the surface, but are tough as oak underneath, and if one prods too hard, they find stone. She claims the stone isn't very deeply buried in Rand and his friends, as if something had scraped away the soft coverings. She also shows that she knows Moiraine and Lan's true names. When Rand asks her why she thinks Moiraine has another name than Mistress Alice, she tells him about her talent. She sees things around some people she looks at that tell her about things that will happen to that person in the future. When she tells Rand about her visions concerning him and his friends, he begins to think she may be crazy. As he begins to walk away from her, Min calls to him that he can't escape her, and he starts to move even faster. Several streets away, Rand finally begins to slow down and take in the sights of the town. Rand sees that the people of Baerlon look remarkably like anyone he might have seen in the Two Rivers. After wandering around for a while, he sees a man who looks like Paden Fane, only it turns out that it really is Paden Fane, and the man runs away from Rand. Rand chases him and catches him in an alley, but the man is grimy and looks like he's been on the run. When Rand asks him to come back to the Stag and Lion where they're staying, Fane declines, begging Rand not to tell Moiraine about him, then runs away again. As Rand once again chases after Fane, he knocks down Mat. Mat admits to Rand that he had the same dream, and the two agree to ask the Gleeman what they should do, but realize that they need to get Perrin to agree to their plan of not telling Moiraine. Rand and Mat head back toward the inn, but see three children of the light walking down the street toward them. Mat concludes that they seem to be too full of themselves and decides to play a trick on the trio. He climbs out a shop window onto the rooftop and uses his sling to set loose a set of barrels on the street which crash into the mud and splatter the white cloaks. Rand laughs and earns the ire of the three men. When they confront him, he tells them accidents happen, and throws back his cloak to reveal his sword. One of the white cloaks notices the heron mark, but another scoffs that Rand is too young to have earned it. Rand is feeling flushed and feverish, but just as the confrontation is about to escalate, the white cloaks see the town watch approaching and walk away. Mat returns and tells Rand he must be crazy. They try to make their way back to the inn, but get lost a couple of times before they run into Tom. They tell him about their dreams and he agrees it would be best not to tell Moiraine yet. The three finally arrive back at the inn, where Perrin rushes out to meet them. He says that Nynaeve has come to Baerlon to find them. Reluctantly, the four of them go inside to face her. Chapter 16, The Wisdom. Inside the inn, Rand runs into Min again. She tells him that Nynaeve is a part of the trouble that he and the others are in and that they are all in greater danger now that she's arrived. When the group enters the room, Nynaeve and Moiraine are facing each other from opposite ends of the table. Rand takes a seat and the others follow his lead to do the same. After persuading Nynaeve that the drink previously set in front of her is not poisoned, Lan says that he would be interested in knowing how she found them, to which Nynaeve replies that she followed their trail. The warder is surprised at this, but Nynaeve was taught to hunt and track by her father, who didn't have sons, so taught Nynaeve instead. Lan compliments her on her skill and she hides a blush by burying her face in her cup. When Moiraine begins to question the wisdom, she replies that she has come to take Egwene and the boys back to Emond's Field. Tom scolds Nynaeve for not being more careful about what she says regarding Moiraine's true identity, since there are those in Baerlon who would kill her and anyone with her simply for what she is. Rand states that they can't go back because the Trollocs would follow them, to which Nynaeve replies that he sounds just like Tam. Emond's Field had a town meeting to determine what should be done about the four young people who vanished on winter night, and Tam was insistent that he should be sent to bring them home, even though he couldn't even walk. She also says that Mat's father was more afraid that Mat's practical jokes would get him into trouble than he was of Moiraine, and Master Luwin is not pleased to find Perrin gone either. Nynaeve continues that while she might have expected poor judgment from Rand, Mat and Perrin, she thought Egwene had more sense. Egwene, attempting to hide her unbraided hair inside her hood, objects weakly that she left a note, but earns only a dark look from Nynaeve. Before Nynaeve can subject the girl to a tongue lashing, however, Moiraine interrupts that she and the wisdom still need to speak, and asks Egwene and the others to leave so that they may do so privately. After some time, Nynaeve emerges from the room and talks to Rand. She reveals that she left Emond's Field to come after the group after convincing the women's circle that it had to be done, since the village council could not reach a decision. Rand asks what else was said between her and the Aes Sedai, and Nynaeve replies that it was mostly more of the same, but that Moiraine seemed to be searching for a reason for the winter night attack, asking if any of the three boys was born outside Emond's Field. Rand then tells her of Tam's fevered ramblings after the battle at the farm, but Nynaeve assures him that when Tam brought his wife back to the Two Rivers, that it was her child she was carrying. Rand, however, takes this as confirmation that he was indeed born outside the Two Rivers. He asks Nynaeve what she is going to do, but she will only say that he'll have to wait and see. Thanks for watching part 2. Click here for part 3. For more fantasy book videos, don't forget to leave a like, write down a comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.